Hello learners, this is Habiba with Excel with me. If you like the video, please do like, share, subscribe and comment below. Let's start today's class, that is research in education, with the topic types of measurement scale, that is nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio scale. Defined as the four fundamental levels of measurement scales that are used to collect data in the form of surveys, questionnaires, etc. As we have learnt about all these things, what are the techniques of research we have understood, under which surveys, questionnaires are used, now under which we have to use these types of measurement scale for those data. So let's start with first one, that is nominal scale, that is a naming scale. That means where variables are simply named or labeled with no specific order, and they are also called the categorical variable scale because they can be put in some categories. Now let's see some examples of variables that can be measured on a nominal scale. They include first, gender. It can be male or female. Eye color, maybe blue, green, brown, etc. Then blood type, O negative, O positive, A plus, etc. etc. Then place you live, maybe city, suburb, rural. So these are all the nominal scales, that is we are naming those categories. We are putting them in category and we are naming them also. Variables that can be measured on a nominal scale have the following properties. They have no natural order. For example, we cannot arrange eye colors in order of worst to best or lowest to highest, as we give in ranks here, first rank, second rank, like that. Here we cannot give the arranging in order. Now categories are mutually exclusive. For example, an individual cannot have both blue and brown eyes obviously together at the same time. Similarly, an individual cannot live both in the city and in a rural area. That person has to be at one place. Now the only number we can calculate for these variables are counts. That is, for example, we can count how many individuals have blonde hair, how many have black hair, how many have brown hair, etc. Now the only measurement of central tendency we can calculate for these variables is the mode. The mode tells us which category had the most counts. For example, we could find which eye color occurred most frequently. Now the most common way that nominal scale data is collected is through a survey. For example, a researcher might survey 100 people and ask each of them what type of place they live in. For example, what could be the question? What type of area do you live in? Possible answer could be city, suburbs or rural. Using this data, the researcher can find out how many people live in each area as well as which area is the most common to live in. So after doing the survey, here also we get, when the population survey happens, then we can see this kind of data will come up, how many people are living in towns, cities, rural areas in the. Then ordinal scale, a scale used to label variables that have a natural order, that is, but no quantifiable difference between values. Now some examples of variables that can be measured on ordinal scale include satisfaction. That means we can give in on the scale very unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied, very satisfied. So this is one kind. The second one, socio-economic status. People can be with low income or medium income or high income. Then workplace status, that is entry analyst maybe, or analyst 1, analyst 2, or lead analyst, or any kind of a work status we can take. Now degree of pain, that is small amount of pain, medium amount of pain, high amount of pain. So these are all the ordinal scale variables examples. Now variables that can be measured on an ordinal scale have the following properties. They have a natural order. For example, very satisfied is better than satisfied, which is better than neutral, etc. Now the difference between values cannot be evaluated. For example, we cannot exactly say that the difference between very satisfied and satisfied is the same as the difference between satisfied and neutral. Now the third property, the two measures of central tendency we can calculate for these variables are the mode and the median. The mode tells us which category had the most counts and the median tells us the middle value. Now ordinal scale data is often calculated by companies through surveys who are looking for feedback about their product or service. For example, a grocery store might survey 100 recent customers and ask them about their overall experience. Question could be, how satisfied were you with your most recent visit to our store? Then possible answer could be very unsatisfied, unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied, very satisfied. If we can take in a teaching profession, when we take micro teaching, we can take the subjects as the B.Ed students. Then we can, what question we can ask related to these teachers? That means how satisfied were you with your mentor? Then you can say very unsatisfied, unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied, very satisfied. This can be the possible answer. Now using this data, the grocery store can analyze the total number of responses for each category, identify which response was most common and identify the median response. Now let's see the third one, interval scale. That means label variables that have a neutral order and a quantifiable difference between variables, but there could be no true zero value. Now let's see some examples of variables that can be measured on an interval scale here. Temperature, that is measured in Fahrenheit or Celsius. Then credit scores measured from 300 to 850, like that. These are some examples. Now variables that can be measured on an interval scale have the following properties. Number one, these variables have natural order. We can measure the mean, median, mode and standard deviation of these variables. Now these variables have an exact difference between values. That is, recall that ordinal variables have no exact difference between variables. We don't know if the difference between very satisfied and satisfied is the same as the difference between satisfied and neutral. Now for variables on an interval scale, though we know that the difference between a credit score of 850 and 800 is the exact same as the difference between 800 and 750. Now these variables have no true zero value. For example, it's impossible to have a credit score of 0. That is, it's also impossible to have an SAT score of 0. And for temperature, it's possible to have negative values. Example, minus 10 degree Fahrenheit, which means there isn't a true zero value, that values cannot grow below. Now the nice thing about interval scale data is that it can be analyzed in more ways than nominal or ordinal data. For example, researchers could gather data on the credit scores of residents in a certain country and calculate the following metrics. That is median credit score, that is the middle credit score, or median or mode, or the standard deviation of credit scores. That is a way to measure how spread out credit scores are. Now the last one, the fourth one, ratio scale. It labels variables that have a natural order, a quantifiable difference between values, that is a true zero value. Some examples of variables that can be measured on a ratio scale include height, that can be measured in centimeters, inches, feet, etc., and cannot have a value below 0. Then weight obviously can be measured in kilograms, pounds, etc., and cannot have a value below 0. Then length, same way, can be measured in centimeters, inches, feet, etc., and cannot have a value below 0. Now, variables that can be measured on a ratio scale have the following properties. These variables have a natural order. We can calculate the mean, median, mode, standard deviation, and a variety of other descriptive statistics for these variables. These variables have an exact difference between values. Now, these variables have a true zero value here. For example, length, weight, and height all have a minimum value 0 that cannot be exceeded. It's not possible for ratio variables to take on negative values. For this reason, the ratio between values can be calculated. For example, someone who weighs 200 lbs can be said to weigh 2 times as much as someone who weighs 100. Likewise, someone who is 6 feet tall is 1.5 times taller than someone who is 4 feet tall. Now, the data that can be measured on a ratio scale can be analyzed in a variety of ways. For example, researcher could gather data about the height of individuals in a certain school and calculate the following metrics, that is median height, mean height, mode height, standard deviation of heights, ratio of tallest height to smallest height. Now, let's see, before concluding, the properties of 4 at one glance, that is nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Property first one has a natural order. Nominal, yes. Ordinal, yes. For 4, interval, ratio, yes, they have natural order. Then the second one, mode can be calculated. Yes, mode can be calculated for 4 scales, nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Now, median can be calculated. No, nominal we cannot calculate median, but for 3 of them, ordinal, intervals, ratio, we can. Then mean can be calculated only for interval and ratio. Then exact difference between values we can understand only interval and ratio. Has a true zero value for only ratio scale. So we come to the end of this session. If you like the video, please do like, share, subscribe, and comment below. Thanks for your attention and time. Happy learning.